515,000 views. That's the number USA Basketball pulled when Caitlin Clark was featured on their official social media accounts earlier this year. Now fast forward just a few months. Same account, same platform, same type of content, and they're pulling 15,000. Not 15,000 less, 15,000 total. That's a 97% drop in engagement. And if you think that's just a bad algorithm day or an unlucky post, you haven't been paying attention. Because when you line up the numbers side by side, what you're looking at isn't a dip in interest. It's a full-blown collapse. And the wildest part is that everyone saw this coming except the people who made the decision that caused it. The Caitlin Clark fanbase has been sounding the alarm for years. They watched her drag Iowa to back-to-back national championship games. They watched her shatter Pete Maravich's all-time scoring record, a record that stood for over 50 years. They watched her walk into the WNBA as a rookie and immediately become the most-watched player in league history. And when USA Basketball left her off the Olympic roster back in June, those fans didn't just get upset. They made a prediction. They said the numbers would crater without her. And right now, every single metric on every single platform is proving them right. Let's rewind to that roster decision, because it's impossible to understand what's happening right now. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. Now, without understanding what happened in June, USA Basketball finalized their 12-player roster for the Paris Olympics, and Caitlin Clark's name wasn't on it. This was a player who had just completed the most statistically dominant individual career in NCAA history. A player who was in the middle of a rookie WNBA season that was rewriting the league's viewership records. A player whose games were drawing 3 times the audience of every other matchup on the schedule. And the selection committee looked at all of that and said no thanks. The backlash was immediate and massive. Sports media erupted. Fans flooded social media with outrage. Former players weighed in from both sides. Some argued the roster was about winning gold and that veteran players deserved their spots. Others pointed out that basketball, at the highest level, has always balanced competitive excellence with cultural relevance, and leaving off the most culturally relevant player in the sport's history was a catastrophic miscalculation. Now, rumors have circulated that internal dynamics played a role in that decision. Some reports suggest that veteran players on the roster had reservations about Clark's inclusion, possibly viewing her meteoric rise and the media frenzy surrounding her as a disruption to team chemistry. Others have speculated that the selection committee underestimated just how much of the sport's newfound audience was tied directly to one person. None of that has been officially confirmed, and the committee has maintained that the decision was purely basketball-based. But whatever the reasoning, the consequences are now playing out in real time, and they're far worse than anyone on that committee likely imagined. Here's where the numbers tell a story that no amount of spin can rewrite. USA Basketball recently posted their training camp content featuring some of the biggest names currently in women's basketball. Kayla Thornton, a legitimate professional talent, gets her highlight posted, 15,000 views. Another clip drops, this time showcasing some fast-paced drills and sharp ball movement, 28,000 views. They push another one, a little more polished, a little more produced, 60,000 views on a good day. Now pull up Clark's content from the exact same account posted just months earlier, 200,000 views, 300,000 views, 515,000 views. That's not a gap, that's a canyon, Colossus. And it gets more damning when you start looking at the individual players who are supposed to be carrying the torch. 2. Paige Bueckers is one of the most recognizable names in women's college basketball. She's a former National Player of the Year, a UConn star who's been on magazine covers and national broadcasts since she was 18 years old. Her training camp highlight pulled 60,000 views. That sounds decent until you realize it's roughly 88% below what Clark was generating on the same platform. Juju Watkins had one of the most electrifying freshman seasons in recent memory at USC. averaging 27.1 points per game and shouldering an entire program's expectations. Her content pulled 34,000 views. That's 93% below Clark's numbers. And here's the part that eliminates every possible excuse. This is the same account, the same platform, the same content format, the same time of year. The only variable that changed was the person in the thumbnail. You can't blame the algorithm. You can't blame the posting schedule. You can't blame the production quality. The audience showed up for one person, and when that person disappeared, so did they. Now, if this were just about social media vanity metrics, you could argue it doesn't matter that much. But these numbers represent something far more consequential than likes and shares. Social media engagement is a leading indicator for everything that actually pays the bills in professional sports. Broadcast viewership, sponsorship deals, advertising rates, merchandise sales, ticket demand, all of it correlates directly with the kind of digital engagement these accounts are measuring. When a sponsor is deciding whether to invest 7 or 8 figures into a partnership with USA Basketball or the WNBA, they're not just looking at last season's TV ratings. They're looking at real-time engagement data. They're looking at how many eyeballs are on the content right now. And right now, those eyeballs are telling a story that should make every executive in women's basketball deeply uncomfortable. The WNBA just announced expansion into Golden State and Toronto, moves that signal enormous confidence in the league's growth trajectory. Portland is reportedly in the conversation too. These are billion-dollar markets with billion-dollar expectations, and they're banking on the assumption that women's basketball has turned a permanent corner in terms of mainstream relevance. But what if that corner was actually just one player? What if the record-breaking attendance figures and the historic television ratings weren't evidence of a sport ascending, but evidence of a single individual transcending? Because that's exactly what these USA Basketball numbers suggest. Strip away Clark, and you're left with engagement levels that wouldn't impress a mid-major college program. That's not a foundation for billion-dollar expansion. That's a house of cards. And this is where Geno Auriemma's recent comments become incredibly relevant to the bigger picture. The legendary UConn head coach, a man with 11 national championships and more insight into women's basketball than almost anyone alive, was asked about the possibility of WNBA players leaving college early. His answer was essentially a warning. He compared the ideal model to baseball, where players either go straight out of high school, which almost none of them are physically or mentally ready for, or they commit to 3 years of college development. He specifically mentioned players like Sarah Strong and Ozzie Fudd, arguing that if they bolt after one season, you lose the sustained narrative that turns talented players into household names. And he's absolutely right, but maybe not for the reasons he thinks. The development argument has merit from a basketball standpoint. Women's basketball doesn't have the NBA's G League infrastructure or its decades of experience integrating young talent into professional rosters. A 19-year-old guard who dominates in college might struggle physically and mentally against grown women who've been playing professional basketball for a decade. But the real argument Auriemma is making, whether he fully realizes it or not, is about storytelling. Women's basketball builds its stars through multi-year college arcs. The rivalries, the heartbreaks, the comebacks, the record chases. That's what turns a talented freshman into a cultural phenomenon. By the time she's a senior, think about what made Caitlin Clark into Caitlin Clark. It wasn't just the talent. There are dozens of incredibly talented women's basketball players in every generation. It was the 4-year narrative arc at Iowa that transformed her from a gifted scorer into a once-in-a-generation cultural event. Her freshman year, she averaged 26.6 points per game and immediately announced herself as someone special. But if she'd left after that season, the way some are now advocating players should be able to, she would have entered the WNBA as a talented but relatively unknown commodity. Maybe she'd have made an all-star team. Maybe she'd have had a solid career. But she wouldn't have become the player who made your aunt, who's never watched basketball, suddenly care about a Sunday afternoon game in April. It was the journey that created the phenomenon. The sophomore year, where she started hitting those logo threes that went viral. The junior year run to the national championship game, where she put Iowa on her back against South Carolina and came up just short in a game that devastated her visibly on national television. And then the senior year revenge tour, where she came back with a singular mission, broke Maravich's record in front of a sold-out arena, and dragged Iowa back to the championship game one more time. 4 years, 4 acts, a complete story with rising action, a devastating climax, and a final chapter that had the entire country watching. That's what builds the kind of crossover audience that generates 515,000 views on a social media highlight. You cannot manufacture that in a single college season, no matter how talented the player is. And if the sport moves toward early departures, it won't just lose developmental time on the court. It'll lose the storytelling engine that creates its biggest stars. But here's the uncomfortable truth that goes beyond roster decisions and college timelines. Women's basketball has a fundamental marketing problem, and it starts with how the sport presents its athletes to the world. Look at how USA Basketball typically packages its content. It's polished, it's professional, it's relentlessly positive and team-oriented. Every quote is carefully curated. Every highlight is presented with the same sanitized energy. Nobody says anything controversial. Nobody shows real emotion beyond the approved range of "grateful to be here" and "honored to represent my country." And that approach generates 15,000 views because it's boring. It's completely and utterly boring to the casual viewer who has 1,000 other options competing for their attention at any given moment. Now look at why Clark breaks through all of that noise. She takes shots from the logo that make coaches lose their minds. She talks trash to opponents on national television. She shows genuine frustration when things go wrong and genuine joy when things go right. She's not performing a version of herself that's been approved by a media relations department. She's authentically, sometimes recklessly, herself. And that authenticity is magnetic to the modern sports audience because it feels real in a media landscape drowning in manufactured content. The NBA understood this decades ago. The league didn't become a global phenomenon because of team-first messaging and polished corporate content. It became a phenomenon because it embraced individual personalities. Michael Jordan's killer instinct, Allen Iverson's defiance, Kobe's Mamba mentality, Steph Curry's joy, LeBron's dominance. These were individual brands that transcended the sport and pulled in audiences who didn't care about pick-and-roll coverages or defensive rotations. They cared about the person. They cared about the story. Women's basketball keeps trying to market the sport itself, the purity of the game, the teamwork, the fundamentals. And while those things are genuinely impressive, they don't move the needle with casual fans. Casual fans follow people, not systems. They follow personalities, not programs. And right now, women's basketball has one personality that commands mainstream attention, and she's not at training camp. So what happens in September when USA Basketball actually takes the court for international competition? If training camp highlights can't crack 70,000 views on their best day, what are the actual game broadcasts going to pull? This is where the strategic dilemma becomes genuinely painful for the people running these programs. They essentially have 3 options, and none of them are good. Option 1. They adjust their selection criteria for future competitions to explicitly factor in marketability and star power alongside pure basketball ability. This is what the NFL and NBA have quietly done for decades with their all-star selections and marquee scheduling. But it would be a radical and controversial shift for a program that has always publicly insisted its decisions are based solely on basketball merit. Option 2. They accept that non-Olympic international competitions will have minimal viewership and treat them purely as basketball development opportunities, essentially writing off the media value and hoping that Olympic years generate enough inherent interest to keep sponsors and broadcasters engaged. This is the path of least resistance, but it comes with serious financial implications. Sponsorship contracts aren't structured around quadrennial spikes in interest. They're built on sustained engagement, and 4 years is a long time to deliver diminished returns. Option 3. They try to build up alternative stars through strategic media exposure, increased investment in content production, and deliberate narrative building around specific players. This is probably the healthiest long-term approach, but it requires patience that the current media landscape doesn't reward. And it requires a level of authenticity and personality from the players that the sport's current culture actively discourages. And even if they execute this strategy perfectly, there's no guarantee it works. Because the brutal reality is that star power in women's basketball, or any sport for that matter, isn't something you can engineer in a boardroom. It requires a specific and rare combination of elite talent, compelling personality, cultural timing, and narrative opportunity that aligns in ways nobody can predict or control. Clark's appeal isn't just about being good at basketball. Paige Bueckers is good at basketball. Juju Watkins is good at basketball. A'ja Wilson might be the best player in the world right now, and her content doesn't generate a fraction of Clark's engagement. The difference is something intangible, something that has to do with the way Clark carries herself, the shots she takes, the way she interacts with the moment. She plays with a fearlessness that borders on absurdity sometimes, pulling up from 30 feet with a defender draped on her like it's a layup drill. She has a genuine swagger that women's basketball has rarely seen at this level. And instead of being celebrated, it's often been criticized by people within the sport who view it as showboating or disrespectful. But here's the thing those critics are missing. That swagger, that audacity, that willingness to be polarizing, that's exactly what makes people who've never watched a single WNBA game in their lives suddenly interested. Controversy creates attention, personality creates loyalty, and competence in the face of criticism creates legends. Clark has all three, and the sport keeps trying to minimize the first two while only acknowledging the third. Meanwhile, the safe and sanitized version of women's basketball that USA Basketball is currently presenting to the world is getting 15,000 views. The market has spoken. It's spoken loudly, clearly, and repeatedly. And the message is brutally simple. Give us something worth watching, or we'll watch something else. And this brings us to the part of this story that should genuinely concern anyone who cares about the long-term health of women's basketball. Because what these numbers reveal isn't just a Clark versus everyone viewership gap. They reveal something far more fundamental about where this sport actually stands in terms of mainstream cultural relevance. The narrative, all season long, has been that women's basketball has arrived. Record TV ratings, sold-out arenas, expansion teams in major markets, corporate sponsorships pouring in at unprecedented levels. And all of that is true. But the USA Basketball engagement data suggests that the foundation underneath all of that growth is far shakier than anyone wants to admit. Because if you remove one player from the equation and your engagement drops by 97%, you don't have a popular sport. You have a popular player. Those are two very different things, and confusing them could lead to catastrophic miscalculations by the leagues, networks, and investors who are currently betting billions on women's basketball's trajectory. The WNBA didn't suddenly become 3 times more popular this season. Indiana Fever games became 3 times more popular this season. The league average without Clark remained under 400,000 viewers per game, which is roughly where it's been for years. The attendance boom was overwhelmingly concentrated at Fever home and road games. The social media explosion was overwhelmingly driven by Clark-related content. Strip all of that away, and you're left with a league that's incrementally growing, yes, but not at the exponential rate that the headline numbers suggest. And that matters enormously when you're talking about expansion franchises paying hundreds of millions in entry fees based on projected growth. It matters when broadcast partners are negotiating rights deals based on viewership trends. It matters when sponsors are calculating return on investment for multi-year partnerships. All of those calculations assume the audience growth is structural, that it's built on broad-based interest in the sport itself. But what if it's individual? What if it's built on one 22-year-old point guard from Des Moines, Iowa, who happens to play basketball in a way that captivates people who've never cared about the sport before? That's a fundamentally different value proposition, and it carries fundamentally different risks because individual-driven audiences are volatile. They follow the person, not the institution. If Clark gets injured, the numbers disappear. If she has an off year, the numbers dip. If she retires early, the numbers evaporate entirely. Building a billion-dollar sports infrastructure on that kind of foundation isn't bold. It's reckless. Unless you have a plan to convert Clark's individual audience into sustained institutional interest. And based on how USA Basketball and the WNBA have handled things so far, there doesn't appear to be much of a plan at all. They left her off the Olympic roster, alienating her fan base. They allowed veteran players to publicly and physically target her throughout her rookie season without meaningful intervention, creating an adversarial dynamic that made casual fans sympathize with Clark and resent the league. And now they're posting training camp content featuring other players and watching in real time as the audience simply doesn't show up. The 15,000 view highlights aren't outliers. They're not anomalies. They're not the result of bad timing or poor content strategy. They're the baseline. They're what women's basketball content looks like without Caitlin Clark. And everyone from USA Basketball executives to WNBA team owners to network programming directors needs to internalize that reality immediately. Because September is coming fast. International competition is on the schedule. And the most compelling player in the sport won't be on the court. The seats might be filled with talented, dedicated, incredible athletes who've earned every bit of their place on that roster. But the screens won't be filled with viewers. And in the modern sports economy, it's the screens that pay the bills. That's the Caitlin Clark effect. It's not a talking point. It's not fan exaggeration. It's not media hype. It's a measurable, verifiable, undeniable market reality that USA Basketball is about to spend an entire competition proving to everyone who still refuses to see it. And when those September broadcast ratings come in, when the social media metrics continue to flatline, when the sponsors start asking uncomfortable questions about where the audience went, the answer will be exactly where the fans have been saying it would be all along. Wherever number 22 is playing, that's where the audience will be. And if she's not playing for you, well, 15,000 views is what you get. The only question left is whether the people running women's basketball will learn that lesson before it's too late, or whether they'll keep pretending the foundation is solid while the numbers keep telling a very different story. Because right now, the numbers aren't whispering, they're screaming. And everyone who cares about this sport's future should be listening. Stay locked with my channel, Simply Explained, for more update.